Chris Hassel, Brady Quinn, Danny Cannell with us. Huge game coming up. Obviously, it would be a big blow if the Packers don't have him. We don't know if that's going to be the case yet, though.
Right. I don't know if it's time to panic necessarily. I think, obviously, if you get back the news that there's been another positive test tomorrow, that's game set. He's out for Thursday night. But I'm not panicking quite yet. I've got a family member who just went through having the whole false positive deal and all that. So I know how this works. If he's not there, though, I think the concern is, who can you really lean on? I mean, Matt LaFleur does such a good job of moving around Davante Adams, making it difficult for teams to double him or finding ways to eliminate from the game. And we know Aaron Rodgers and Davante Adams probably have the best connection of any quarterback wide receiver in the NFL. So the pressure's on these guys. Allen Lazard, Valdez-Scantling, Tanyan too. I mean, you'll see a little bit too of maybe Randall Cobb. You get Amari Rodgers mixing in there. And then obviously Aaron Jones. I think Aaron Jones out of the backfield and how he could play a role too in the passing game will be increased because of this. Now, I don't know if it's a favorable matchup versus the Cardinals linebackers, but that's really who the pressure is going to fall on when it's all said and done.
Yeah, I totally agree. I mean, this is one of the best receivers in the league. He's Aaron Rodgers' favorite target. He's a pretty unstoppable force on the offensive side of the ball, and you're going to need all that offense going against this Cardinals team, which has been lights out themselves with Kyler Murray at the helm. But this is the NFL, and it's this is where the ruthless nature of it comes, and you have to have a next man up mentality. And whoever it is, whether it's Lazard or even Aaron Jones from the backfield, this is when everybody else has to step it up. Randall Cobb, a guy who, Aaron Rodgers really wanted to come back to provide some depth at the receiver position. But if there's any quarterback that you do trust to kind of figure it out and to make everybody better around him, it is Aaron Rodgers in this position. Clearly, he would love to have his guy out there with him, but Aaron has a way of just finding guys, hitting the open man, figuring out a way to make it work. So if there's any line movement in this one, I might say, hey, this is a spot to get some value on the Packers, because Aaron Rodgers usually rises to the occasion when the chips are down around him.
Yeah, Packers anywhere between a 4 and a 5-point favorite at this point. Line might not move that much because it's a wide receiver and not a quarterback here. But Brady, as a quarterback, how does that affect your game planning during the week and your scheme when you don't know if you're going to have your best player?
Yeah, I mean, look, again, it's going to change dramatically because Davante Adams is going to be your first read more than 50% of the time, if not your second read. I mean, you can make the case, and I remember talking to the Atlanta Falcons when Matt Ryan, we were talking about how many targets Julio Jones would get, and they're like, oh, we probably should have had more last week. When you have a guy that's talented like a Davante Adams, you should be looking at his way every single time you drop back if you're dropping back 40-plus times a game. So it's going to change, obviously, the reads, the progressions, how they go about trying to scheme up some things. They might fill the need where they can't necessarily isolate Davante Adams, where they have to do that for other guys, create bunches, stacks, motion to help them get open if they can't get open on their own. So from a game planning standpoint, it's a short week. You don't have a ton of time to make a ton of changes, but the reality is if Davante Adams isn't there, it is a big-time adjustment for you as a quarterback as far as where you're looking after the snap of the football and how you're going about distributing the football to that group of wide receivers, Danny.
I think probably the hardest thing is not knowing. You're going through this testing protocol. Can he test out? And you're wondering, and you're trying to set a game plan around one of your focal points and truly not knowing, because it is going to be different what the offense looks like. And whatever player you would plug in behind him will not have the same capabilities that Davante Adams has. So it's almost one of those ones where you kind of rather just get an answer. Like, let me know, is he out or is he in? And then plan accordingly. The fact that you kind of have to have two plans in place, they won't, because you can't really do that. But knowing that, hey, some of these plays not be as high on the priority list on the call sheet if Davante Adams is in or if he's out, I think that can make it a little bit tricky for an offense, for a quarterback in Aaron Rodgers, and for a play caller, Matt LaFleur. That could be a little bit challenging for him. But from the quarterback perspective, all you can do is go out there, go through your progressions, read the defense, see what's there for you, read it out the way you always would and say, all right, I'm just going to trust the offense, trust the system. And if you're Aaron Rodgers, you can trust your natural abilities way more you could than when I was playing. So I have a feeling they'll be fine. It'll be a loss for him if he's out, but they'll figure it out.
I also think they may run the football more. I mean, you're going to try to hammer away at the Arizona Cardinals. As good as that offense has been, I don't think you want to get in the mode of having to face Kyler Murray and those weapons on the outside and DeAndre Hopkins and A.J. Green. So, maybe with this, if Adams is going to be out, you're going to be handing the football off more as a quarterback, basing some things more off of that. And I'd just say the last thing is, for Vance Joseph, the defensive coordinator for the Cardinals, it's obviously a little bit more difficult than how you want to go about stopping that passing attack, because you don't have that one guy they're going to be focusing on, or in situational plays, third down, red zone, you're probably looking to double Adams if you're playing a lot of man-to-man structures. So you're going to be trying to look to double him wherever he's at when he can, or at least give him some post-safety help where he's going to shade to that side of the field to help alleviate some of the pressure put on that cornerback. So that goes out the window if Davante Adams doesn't play. And now you've got a defense that's kind of looking around saying, who are we going to take away in those situational plays? And you don't really have that until you get into the game. You see who they're trying to target, who they're trying to work the football towards. That's kind of that, X's and O's, cat and mouse game you'll see throughout of it if Davante Adams doesn't play.
All right, so Adams could be out of that game against the Arizona Cardinals on Thursday night. Meantime, the Cardinals have activated linebacker Chandler Jones and defensive lineman Zach Allen from the COVID list ahead of that matchup in 3 days. Adams is one of the best wide receivers, if not the best wide receiver in the NFL. He's top 3 in receiving yards and receiving touchdowns. We've got Dave Richard with us to attack this from a fantasy angle. Dave, obviously it'd be terrible timing if you've got Davante Adams on your team and you don't have him this week. Where should you turn?
Well, you're obviously going to turn to the waiver wire, Chris, and this is really where there's a lot of receivers that make a lot of sense this week as good alternatives for Davante Adams. You can start in Green Bay with Allen Lazard, Randall Cobb, and Marquez Valdez-Scantling. And Scantling's actually got a chance to be activated this week. He can go right into the lineup, provided that those 3 guys are healthy and ready to go. And a point to bring up on Aaron Rodgers. Last year, he played 2 games without Davante Adams, and you might think to yourself, oh, he must have been a nightmare. Nope. In those 2 games, 610 passing yards and 7 touchdowns. I think Rodgers kind of gets up for things like this, where he likes to overcome the challenge of not having his #1 receiver. And this Cardinals pass rush is pretty good, but the secondary is still suspect despite the numbers that they've allowed this year. And last week, for example, against Houston, they looked amazing. But I think that this would be a challenge, even without Davante Adams, to try and slow down Aaron Rodgers. And you heard Brady and Danny talk about the run game for Green Bay. We know in the fantasy world that these short weeks tend to favor the running backs more than other positions. Think about Dearness Johnson in the big game he just had against Denver, and the Denver Broncos running backs catching touchdowns last week against Cleveland. I know those guys aren't in this game, but it's the same theory. Running backs tend to do better on the short week. Now, if you can't get your hands on a Packers wide receiver, let me tell you that Khalif Raymond, who is the #1 receiver in Detroit, and the man has at least 6 catches in each of his last 2 games, and he's lightning fast, and the Lions play the Eagles this week, and it's a winnable game for Detroit. That's another wide receiver that fantasy managers can turn to off the waiver wire, and he's available in literally 90+% of fantasy leagues.
And Allen Lazard, I mean, he's at 8% right now. How high is that number going to go if Adams is out?
Even if Adams comes back, he's still going to get picked up just in case. I would imagine that it'll be anywhere from 30 to 75% rostered, and I think he'd be at worst a #3 fantasy wide receiver.
All right, Dave Richard with us here. Davante Adams on the COVID list. Still a chance he plays Thursday, but with the short week, it is that much more unlikely he'll be able to have 2 negative tests 24 hours apart and return to the field. Dave can be heard along with Heath Cummings and Jamie Eisenberg and Adam Azer. Fantasy Football Today, the podcast. It's also live here on CBS Sports HQ, FFT, every weekday at noon Eastern Time.
Do you want a sports network that delivers everything that matters about the game? The highlights, the picks, the instant analysis. No yelling, no fake debates, no politics. Hit the subscribe button and never miss a moment.